All right, chapter 7, what we're going to do is look at some database administration issues. We're going to talk about views. We are going to look at setting up permissions for different things. And we're going to talk a little bit about the system catalog and creating indexes on tables. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a view, and views are actually very useful and helpful when you're working with databases. You can restrict access to certain users to certain areas of data. So for security issues, for privacy issues, you might only allow one rep to look at their customers instead of looking at all the customers. Or you might do it for ease of use instead of having this big giant database that people want to wade through. If they really only need access to a small amount of data, then you can create that in their view. And so we're going to do that. We're going to set up a view for Megan, one of our reps, and we're going to look at her orders. And there's really nothing new to this except for the create view statement, and you give it a name. So I'm going to go ahead and create view. I'm going to put my caps lock on so you guys can see it a little bit better. Create view. You give it a name. So we're going to name this Megan Customers Orders, and you give the command as. And so I'm going to go ahead and select, and again, I'm going to copy this from another file I have open right now so you don't have to watch me type this, because I'm going to go ahead and select a whole lot of info for Megan to look at. We're going to look at her customer name, orders, order dates, order line, item description. So you can see we're headed for a join there because we are going to select that from multiple tables. And we're going to select that from the rep table, the customer table, the orders table, the order line, and the item. We're going to use everything in the tall database that we can. And we're going to go ahead and start with those joins. So with the first one, I join the rep number to the customer table through the rep num, the shared foreign key of the rep num. Then I'm going to join that to for the customer to the orders table using the customer num. We're going to go from the orders to the order line using the order number. And then finally, we're going to be able to get to our information in the item table by using the link between the order line and the order line number. And finally, because this is for Megan, we're going to put her rep number in, which is 30. So we're going to create the view with a name. We're going to select the data that's going to be in the view from the tables, and then we're going to do our joins, and then finally what we're going to do is we're going to select the ones that specifically apply to Megan. So we run that, and it tells us that the view was created. And so now what I can do is I can run queries against just that view. Now it doesn't make a separate table. It actually runs the query first and then runs your query against the table or against the view. But for an end user, it looks as if they are just querying the database. And so just to show you how that works, I'm going to go ahead and just select all from Megan's orders and run that. And we see that there are two orders that are tied to her customers. Okay, so that's how you create a view. It limits the scope of the database. It allows you to make sure that some people can't see some things. You know, at Tarleton, we collect your social security number. I think I've told you this, but I actually don't have access to that anywhere in any of the student information system databases because for privacy issues, they've blocked a lot of that information off. So if we want to get rid of that view, we use the drop view command, just like our drop table. We run it, and now that command is gone. So if we were to run this again, we are going to get an error because that view doesn't exist. Okay, so that's views. Pretty straightforward. So what we're going to do now is we're going to talk about some administrative issues. Now, in your first job, chances are you're not going to end up setting privileges on tables and things like that, but we are going to run through them The two main commands for this section are going to be grant if you're going to grant privileges to something, and then revoke if you're going to take privileges away. The privileges that are the most commonly issued are going to be your select. Does a person have the ability to retrieve data? Do they have the ability to insert data? Because some people might be able to read the database but not put data in. Can they update certain data? Can they delete stuff? And can they alter tables? Okay, so what you do is you choose either your grant or revoke. So let's go ahead and grant select on our reservations table. And I'm going to go ahead and to Jones. It's just a username I set up. Now, depending on how you install this and your user connection, what you're actually connected to, whether you have permissions to do this or not, this section actually might not run. So in your homework, you just have to write the SQL for it and not include this. But I'm going to go ahead and run it. And so table or view does not exist on reservations. On reservation, see, it pays attention when I don't. So I run that and I grant the grant of that permission worked. Now I can also grant to multiple users. So I'm going to grant on guide to Jones and Adams. So I can actually do multiple users at one time and use my grant. I can also do multiple privileges at one time. So I can do select and insert on item to Jones Adams. And notice those multiple values are separated by a comma. And so again, I grant succeeded. What you cannot do, and trust me, you'll get tripped up on this on your homework, and it doesn't give you any good examples in the textbook. What you cannot do is you cannot grant things on multiple tables. So I can't do item comma location or item comma rep there. You have to do an individual statement for each of those. So I could paste that in and change that to rep, and now I could run that statement if I chose to. But if I put commas between tables, it's not going to let me do that. And then the revoke just uses a from. So let's go ahead and revoke some of these privileges. Let's revoke select on guide from Jones Adams. See what happens there. So we highlight that and our revoke down here succeeded. So there's one more shortcut is the all word. The all super powerful. You can grant all on orders to Adams. And now Adams has the ability grant all on orders to, forgot my two. Now Adams has the ability to select, insert, update, delete, and alter, and create indexes, which we'll talk about in a minute. Okay, so that's just a real quick introduction to the security rules that you can give to people. One other thing you could do, let me go ahead and add this one here. Let's go ahead and grant update to someone, but we can actually, in parentheses, specify which fields they can and can't do. So I can actually limit that more on owner to Adams. And so again, when we do that, that means that when Adams goes in to update something, if he gets a little crazy and tries to update the zip code of the users, it'll tell him he can't do it. He doesn't have permission because he can only update last and first name. All right, so again, just look at those examples in your book, write the code out for your homework, but you don't necessarily have to run those if you are getting errors. All right, so Just a couple of more the kind of weird things that we're going to put at the end is we're going to talk about indexing real quick, and you should have covered this in your database class, and if you're currently in database class, you'll get to it soon enough. But indexing actually creates a quick access to things that you search on often. And so if you are constantly searching by customer last name, you can index that table by last name, which is going to speed up processing. So it always seems like a good idea. Well, what the heck, let's index everything because we might need to search by their street address. But every index you add actually lessens the efficiency of the database. So you need to be pretty careful when you're selecting these things. You know, you search by customer's last name. You might search by customer's first name every once in a while, but probably not usual. Not a usual search. You might search by zip code because you're trying to find people in a geographic area, or you might find that you never use that. So a lot of times that's going to be determined by the business rules and what searches are done very, very often. So all you're going to do is you're going to issue the command to create an index. You give it a name. So we're going to index customer name in our tall database, and you tell it on what table it's going to be and in what value you're going to index. And so you run that and it creates an index. There's nothing really to see. It's an internal thing on the database. And then if you want to get rid of it at some point, you just use the drop command to drop the index that you used. So I'm not going to run those. All right, so that's just one thing to improve the efficiency of your database. You can also look at some of the structures of the database. On your midterm exam, you had to use the describe. One person actually used the system catalog to get at the answer, and they were given credit for that. And what the system catalog is this is your data dictionary. So those of you who are currently in 4301 with me are learning the joys of creating data dictionaries. And those of you who've had it previously might remember that fondly as well. But when we run that, depending on what our permissions are, we're going to have some issues there. But pretty much what this is going to give you is some a look at what the tables are and what data types are included in those. All right. So another thing you might want to do is add keys to enforce your referential integrity in your database. Again, I'm not going to run these because I don't know what the data is like. But you're going to use the alter table command. Tell which table you're going to alter. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a foreign key. I'm going to say trip ID, and the reservations table references the same field in the trip table. And so what that does is it establishes the relationship between those tables, and when data entry happens, it will make sure that this foreign key is filled in when this key is as well. Okay, so the last thing in this weird little chapter of the mishmash of things, you can actually have a check. And what a check does is it sees, it's kind of like a data validation at a very low level. A lot of times you'll do data validation on the programming end, whatever program you're writing against the database, but you do have the ability to control the quality of your data a little bit. And so we're going to look at another one. So let's say on our trip table in Colonial Tours, we only had 3 types of trips. And so what we can do is we can alter the table, and what we'll do is we're going to add the check. And so what we'll do is we'll say find the field type, which is one of the fields in our trip table. Type right there. And we tell it that the value that is entered has to be in our list of options. So if somebody tries to enter walking instead of biking, then it would not allow that data entry to occur. So that's all there is really for Chapter 7. This is probably one of the easier and most straightforward homeworks of the semester. Moving on to Chapter 8 next, which is a little bit more complicated because you're going to get to dust off some minor programming skills. And if it's been a while, you need to spend a little bit more time.